A gate at JFK. A packed flight to London. One passenger, Camilla Hemsley, looks at the diverse crowd in business class and makes a complaint that stops the entire plane. "I'm not comfortable," she whispers to the flight attendant. "It's all these people. Why are there so many black people on board?" She demanded to see the pilot. But she never imagined the pilot, Captain Matthew Cole, was standing right behind her, and he had heard every single word. His next move would cost her everything. The air in Gate 34A at JFK was thick with that specific kind of airport tension, a blend of stale Cinnabon, jet fuel, and quiet desperation. American Airlines Flight 110 to London Heathrow was delayed by 45 minutes, a small eternity for those in the crowded terminal. For Camilla Hemsley, it was a personal affront. She checked her Cartier watch for the 10th time in as many minutes, the diamonds winking spitefully under the harsh fluorescent lights. Camilla was a woman sculpted by privilege. Her silver blonde hair was pulled into a chignon so tight it seemed to pull her face taut, erasing any hint of her 54 years. She wore a cream-colored St. John knit suit, impractical for a transatlantic flight, but perfect for telegraphing her status. Her monogrammed Louis Vuitton carry-on sat protectively on the seat beside her, a barrier against the others. She was flying to her daughter Amanda's wedding. Not just any wedding, the wedding. Amanda was marrying into the Creston Doyle family, old London money that made the Hemsleys' substantial New York real estate wealth look positively quaint. This union was the culmination of Camilla's life's work, a masterpiece of social engineering. A 45-minute delay was more than an inconvenience. It was a crack in the foundation of her perfect weekend. "This is just typical," she muttered to her husband Richard on the phone. "The staff are dawdling. Everyone here looks unwashed." She cast a disdainful glance over the C-listers in the general boarding area. Finally, the announcement came for business class boarding. Camilla snapped her phone shut, grabbed her bag, and pushed her way to the front of the line, cutting off a young family who had been waiting patiently. This family, the Wilsons, were also in business class. David and Maria Wilson, both sharply dressed professionals, were taking their two children, 8-year-old Maya and 10-year-old Jamal, to see their grandparents in London. The children were buzzing with an excitement that was both adorable to most and deeply irritating to Camilla. As she settled into her seat, 3A, she was displeased to find the Wilson family were in row 4, directly behind her, and across the aisle in 3B was another black man, typing furiously on a laptop. Further back, she could see several other black passengers. Camilla felt a familiar, acidic prickle in her stomach. This wasn't right. Business class was her refuge, her sanctuary. It was supposed to be orderly. She pulled her cashmere wrap tighter. The lead flight attendant, a kind-faced woman in her 40s named Sarah, was moving through the cabin. "Can I get you a pre-departure beverage, ma'am? Champagne?" Camilla didn't look up from her phone. "Just water. And can you do something about that noise?" She gestured vaguely behind her. Sarah glanced at the Wilson children, who were quietly coloring in their books. "Ma'am, they're being perfectly... It's not just the noise, it's the entire situation." Sarah, a 20-year veteran, knew this tone. Her smile tightened. "I'm not sure what you mean." Camilla finally looked up, her blue eyes like ice chips. She leaned in, her voice a conspiratorial, venomous whisper. I'm not comfortable." She flicked her eyes toward Mr. Wilson, who was helping his daughter with a crayon. "It's those people." Sarah froze. "Mum?" "This cabin," Camilla continued, her voice rising slightly. It's just full of them. I didn't pay $5,000 for a business class ticket to feel unsafe. It's not what I'm used to." The plane, which had been buzzing with the low hum of boarding, went utterly silent. Every passenger in the front cabin, the Wilsons, the man in 3B, a young guy in 2D who was discreetly filming on his phone, all of them heard her. David Wilson, in 4A, unbuckled his seatbelt. He was a tall man, an architect, and he radiated a calm authority. He didn't speak to Camilla, he spoke to Sarah. "Is there a problem here, miss?" Sarah was pale. "No, sir. This passenger was just mistaken." "I am not mistaken," Camilla snapped, her composure cracking. The whisper was gone. "This is ridiculous. It's an American flight, not a refugee plane. I want to be moved. I demand it." "Ma'am, the cabin is full," Sarah said, her voice firm. "And I will not tolerate this kind of language on my flight." "Your flight?" Camilla laughed, a short, barking sound. "You're a waitress. I want to speak to the person in charge. I want to speak to the pilot, right now. Get him out here." "That won't be necessary." The voice was deep, resonant, and came from directly behind Sarah. The curtain to the cockpit, which had been slightly ajar, was pulled back. Standing there was Captain Matthew Cole. He was a tall, imposing man in his late 40s, his uniform crisp, his face impassive. He was also, very clearly, a black man. He had come out to check the final manifest with Sarah and had been standing in the galley, unseen, for the last 30 seconds. He had heard everything. Camilla's mouth opened, then closed. A flush of something. Was it embarrassment? No, annoyance. Crept up her neck. Captain Cole's eyes did not go to Camilla. First he looked at the Wilson family. He gave them a slow, almost imperceptible nod of reassurance. He looked at the man in 3B, who was staring, aghast. He looked at Sarah, who looked like she was about to cry. Then, finally, he looked at Camilla Hemsley. He held her gaze for a long, silent 5 seconds. He didn't look angry. He looked profoundly tired. He didn't say a word to her. He simply turned to Sarah. "Sarah, please secure the galley." Then, in a move that no one could have predicted, Captain Cole reached up, slowly undid the top button of his uniform shirt, and then, with deliberate care, took his pilot's cap from his head. He tucked it under his arm. He turned and walked back through the curtain into the cockpit. A moment later, his first officer, David Epstein, a man in his early 30s, hurried out, his face as white as a sheet. He looked at Camilla in pure horror. "What did you do?" he whispered. Before anyone could answer, the plane's intercom crackled to life. It wasn't the captain's voice. It was First Officer Epstein, who had apparently ducked back into the cockpit and picked up the handset. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your first officer, speaking from the flight deck. Due to an unforeseen and non-mechanical crew issue, the captain has declared himself unfit to fly. He has disembarked the aircraft. This flight is indefinitely delayed. We will need everyone to deplane and return to the gate. I repeat, all passengers must deplane." The cabin exploded. "What? Unfit to fly? What does that mean?" Camilla Hemsley sat bolt upright, her face a mask of incandescent rage. "He what? He abandoned his post. This is unprofessional. I have a wedding to get to." The young man in 2D, Liam, was filming her face, his camera app open. As the Wilsons gathered their children, who were now confused and scared, David Wilson paused by Camilla's seat. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked down at her. "I hope you're proud, lady. You complained there were too many of us on board. Well, now there's one less. The most important one." Camilla was speechless. The blood drained from her face. She finally understood. The pilot she had demanded, the pilot who had just walked off the plane, was one of them. The deplaning process was chaotic, Passengers who had been settled for an international flight were now angry, confused, and dragging their carry-ons back up the jet bridge. The prevailing emotion was fury, and it was all aimed at one person. "That woman!" someone hissed, pointing at Camilla. "She did this." What did she say? Something foul. Liam, the vlogger from Seat 2D, had already uploaded his first clip to TikTok and Twitter. It was a 60-second video showing Camilla's face contorted in anger, with the superimposed text, "This woman just got our flight to London cancelled because she complained about too many black people on board." He included the explosive audio of the first officer's announcement. By the time Camilla Hemsley stepped back into the terminal, the video already had 50,000 views. She immediately stormed the customer service desk, shoving past the other passengers. A flustered gate manager named Daniel was trying to handle the crowd. "This is an outrage!" Camilla shouted, slamming her passport on the counter. "I demand you rebook me on the next flight. And I want that pilot's name. I want him fired. Fired!" Daniel, who had just received a blistering call from airline operations, looked at her with undisguised contempt. "Ma'am, Captain Cole has not been fired." "Cole? Is that his name? He abandoned his post. He's a coward and he's incompetent. He put all these people out because his feelings were hurt." "Ma'am," Daniel said, his voice dangerously low. "Captain Matthew Cole is a 20-year veteran with a flawless record. He is an Air Force veteran. He did not abandon his post." He cited Federal Aviation Regulations 13, which states no pilot may operate an aircraft in a careless or reckless manner. He deemed that your comments constituted a security risk and created an unsafe and hostile environment for him, his crew, and other passengers. "A security risk?" Camilla shrieked. "I am the victim here. Are you?" said David Wilson, who had come to stand beside her with his family. "My children are crying. This entire plane is stranded. All because you couldn't stand the color of my skin. Or his." He pointed toward the jet bridge, where Captain Cole was now walking out, his roll aboard in hand, flanked by 2 airline operations managers. The entire gate area went silent. Captain Cole didn't look at the crowd. He walked with a quiet, steely dignity. As he passed, an older white woman started to clap. Just a slow, steady clap. Then the man from 3B joined in. Then the Wilsons. Within seconds, half the gate was giving Captain Cole a standing ovation. Camilla stood, frozen, as the man she tried to have fired was applauded like a hero. Liam was filming this too. The moment the pilot, Captain Cole, walked out, a hero. "Wow's airport Camilla, our racist passenger." Camilla turned back to the gate agent, her face mottled with rage and humiliation. "I don't care about him. I have a wedding to get to, my daughter's wedding. Put me on the 9 p.m. flight." Daniel typed something into his computer. His face was grim. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Mrs. Hemsley." "What do you mean, you can't?" "I'm a platinum-level flyer. I will buy the seat." "Ma'am, your ticket has been suspended." "Suspended? Your behavior is currently under review by our corporate security and legal teams. As you created the disturbance, you are in breach of the contract of carriage. We will not be transporting you to London. Not tonight. Not possibly. Ever." The floor seemed to drop out from under her. You're banning me? From the airline. You are not welcome on this or any American Airlines flight, pending a full investigation. Security will be here to escort you from the terminal." "Escort me? Like a criminal?" "Those are the rules, ma'am. You created the unsafe environment. You are the liability." As if on cue, 2 uniformed Port Authority officers approached the desk. "Mrs. Hemsley?" Camilla looked around, frantic. The other passengers were watching her, their phones out. The Wilsons were being led by Sarah, the flight attendant, to a private lounge to be rebooked on a partner airline. Liam was providing a live narration to his followers. And now, Airport Camilla is being kicked out of the airport. Karma is fast, people. Camilla Hemsley, who was supposed to be sipping champagne over the Atlantic on her way to a high society wedding, was unceremoniously escorted out of JFK, her luggage trailing behind her like a funeral procession. As she reached the curb, her phone buzzed. It was a Google alert for her own name. A headline from a blog had already popped up. New York socialite Camilla Hemsley filmed in racist rant at JFK. The video had hit 1 million views. The storm had just begun. Camilla spent the night at the TWA Hotel, a place she normally found chic and charming, but which now felt like a sterile prison. She was in a state of shock, a numb disbelief. This was all a mistake, a misunderstanding. She would call Richard. Richard would fix it. She called her husband, Richard Hemsley, a man whose entire identity was built on the Hemsley Properties letterhead. "Richard, darling, you will not believe the day I've had," she began, her voice trembling with self-pity. "Turn on the news, Camilla." His voice was not warm. It was flat. Deadly. "What?" "Richard, I don't. Turn on CNN or Fox or anything. You're on it." She fumbled for the remote. And there she was. Liam's video, now professionally cleaned up, was playing on a loop. A racial justice advocate was being interviewed, and this Airport Camilla situation is just another example of the entitlement and blatant racism that Black Americans face every single day, even in a business-class cabin. "Richard," she gasped, They're calling me racist." "What did you think they would call you?" he hissed. "I've had calls from the entire board. The entire board, Camilla. Our stock it's not good. Hemsley Properties just put out a statement." "A statement? What statement? They should be defending me." "Defending you?" He laughed, a humorless, terrifying sound. "I'll read it to you. Hemsley Properties is a company committed to diversity and inclusion. The personal actions of Camilla Hemsley, who holds no official position in the company, are abhorrent and do not reflect our values. We condemn her behavior in the strongest possible terms." Camilla collapsed onto the bed. "No. Richard, you're my husband. We are Hemsley Properties." "Not anymore, it seems," he said. "The board is convening an emergency ethics meeting tomorrow morning. They're talking about the morality clause in my contract, Camilla. Because of you. Richard, please, you have to fix this. You have to get me to London. I'll miss the wedding." The wedding. A long, cold silence. "I just got off the phone with Amanda." "Oh, good. Is she all right? She must be so worried." "She's worried. She's in tears. Her fiancé's family, the Creston Doyles. They saw the video. The entire London high society group chat is on fire with it." "Oh God, it's that bad? It's worse." Richard's voice dropped. "Camilla, why did you never look up the family? What are you talking about? They're the Creston Doyles. They're immaculate. Julian Creston Doyle, his mother, the matriarch, Lady Annalise Creston Doyle. What about her? She's black, Camilla, from a prominent Jamaican family. You just torpedoed your daughter's wedding to a black family." The world stopped. Camilla couldn't breathe. Black, but they were. Rich. They were titled. The concepts didn't compute in her poisoned mind. She had been so focused on their name, their ancient house, she had never bothered to look at a picture of her daughter's future mother-in-law. "Oh no," she whispered. It was the first real, non-selfish sign of horror. "Yes." "Oh no," Amanda called. "The wedding is postponed." "Postponed?" That's what she said. But I think we both know it's off. They don't want you there. They don't want our name associated with theirs, Amanda said. She said if you show up in London, she will have security remove you herself. The phone slipped from Camilla's hand. This wasn't just a missed flight. This wasn't just bad press. This was the end. The wedding that was meant to be her crowning achievement, the very reason for her entitlement and her rage, was gone. And she, Camilla Hemsley, had been the one to burn it to the ground. She sat in the dark, the TV still flickering with images of her own face, a modern-day Medusa. She was no longer a person. She was a hashtag. Airport Camilla. And the life she knew was over. While Camilla's life was imploding, Captain Matthew Cole was in a quiet conference room at the airline's JFK headquarters, sipping a cup of bad coffee. With him were his union representative and the airline's chief of flight operations, a man named Henderson. "Matthew," Henderson said, rubbing his temples, "you know I respect you. You're one of our best. But you walked off a 737. The operational cost, the cascade of cancellations, we're talking millions." Matthew set his cup down. He was calm. And what's the cost of flying a woman who just, in front of an entire cabin, called my passengers, called me a threat? What's the cost of sitting in that chair for 7 hours, knowing the person in 3A sees me as less than human, but is still trusting me with her life? What if there was an emergency, an evacuation? Would she listen to me? Or would she see the refugee she was so afraid of? The union rep nodded. "He's right, Henderson. He cited 91.13, hostile passenger, unsafe environment. It's a clean call. She threatened the sterile integrity of the entire flight with that language." The language, Henderson sighed. It was bad. It was awful. But people say awful things every day, Matthew. You're a professional. Matthew leaned forward. "Let me tell you a story. My grandfather, William Deacon Cole, flew with the Tuskegee Airmen. He flew a P-51 Mustang, painted with a red tail, over Italy. He was spit on during training in Alabama. He was told he was unfit to fly because of his inferior intellect. He came home from war, a hero, and couldn't get a job as a commercial pilot. He spent his life as a crop duster in Georgia." He pointed to the wings on his chest. "My father, Robert Cole, he got in. He flew for Pan Am. He was one of the first. He endured 30 years of jokes and surprised looks from passengers. He told me, 'Son, you just have to be better than them. So much better they can't deny you.'" Matthew looked at Henderson, his eyes hard. "I've been better my entire life. I went to the academy. I flew F-18s in the Gulf. I have 15,000 hours in the sky. I have done my job flawlessly. And in 2025, I am still standing in a galley, listening to a woman complain about too many black people on my plane. I am tired of being better. I am tired of swallowing it. My grandfather swallowed it. My father swallowed it. I am done." That woman, in that moment, was a bigger threat to my flight than a flock of birds on the runway or a patch of ice on the wing, because she was a threat to its soul. I will not fly a plane for a woman like that. Period. There was a long silence. Henderson finally nodded. "Okay, Matthew, I get it. The airline is going to back you. The video it's catastrophic for her, and frankly, it's making you look like a goddamn folk hero. Our PR team is ecstatic." "I don't care about PR," Matthew said, standing up. "I care about my crew, and I care about the Wilson family." "We've already rebooked them," Henderson said, "on a code share. They're in the air as we speak. We upgraded them to Global First." "Good. What do you want to do now, Matthew? You're off the rotation for 48 hours. Mandatory. You want to go home? Matthew shook his head. No. I have a Boston shuttle in the morning. I'll take a room at the hotel and I'll see you on the line tomorrow. I'm a pilot. I fly planes. As he left the office, his co-pilot, David Epstein, was waiting for him. Captain, David said, his face full of respect. I want to say, what you did, that was the bravest damn thing I've ever seen. It was an honor to be on your deck today, even if we never left the gate. Matthew clapped him on the shoulder. We'll fly together again, David. Now go get some rest. Matthew Cole walked to the hotel, his back straight. He hadn't asked for this fight, but like his grandfather, when the fight came, he would not be found wanting. For Camilla Hemsley, the next 48 hours were a descent into a new, unrecognizable reality. Her life, which had been a fortress of privilege, was dismantled, brick by brick. First, the wedding. It was officially, unequivocally cancelled, not postponed. Cancelled. Amanda sent a one-line email. I will never, ever forgive you for this. You didn't just ruin my wedding, you ruined my life. Camilla was now blocked. Then, the financial guillotine. The emergency board meeting at Hemsley Properties was swift and brutal. Richard Hemsley, facing a full-scale revolt from his partners and investors, was forced to resign. The morality clause was indeed invoked. He wasn't just out, he was out with cause, voiding his multi-million-dollar golden parachute. Richard called her from their Park Avenue apartment, his voice hollow. They took everything, Camilla. The stocks, the options, the severance. We're ruined. Ruined. Richard, don't be so dramatic. We still have the house. The house is leveraged against a business loan. The co-op board is already moving to have us expelled for behavior unbecoming. We have nothing. You, with your mouth. You have destroyed 30 years of my work in 1 minute. Richard, we can fight this, she pleaded. We? There is no we. A courier is on his way to your hotel, Camilla. He has divorce papers. I'm citing cruel and inhuman treatment and extreme financial duress caused by your public actions. I'm taking what's left. You're on your own. The line clicked dead. She was still processing the word divorce when her phone buzzed again. It was the manager of the TWA hotel. Mrs. Hemsley, a small matter. The credit card on file. It's been declined. What? That's Richard's corporate card. Run it again. We have, ma'am, 3 times. And your personal Amex has also been declined. Mr. Hemsley has frozen all your joint assets. Camilla's blood ran cold. She was, at this moment, a woman with nothing but a $4,000 pantsuit and a suitcase full of clothes she now had no occasion to wear. She was evicted from the TWA hotel. She had to use the last $300 in her checking account to book a room at a 3-star airport chain hotel, a Holiday Inn Express out on the conduit, a place she had only ever sneered at from the back of a town car. Her friends were just as quick to abandon her. Calls to her social circle went straight to voicemail. She was kicked out of the charity boards. Her membership at the New York Athletic Club was under review, which was a polite way of saying revoked. She was a ghost, a pariah. She spent a week in that beige, soul-crushing hotel room, watching her old life be auctioned off on the news. Richard had already listed the apartment. Hemsley Properties was being restructured and rebranded. She had to get out of New York. But where would she go? She had no home. She had no money. She finally sold her Cartier watch, the one she had checked so impatiently at the gate, to a cash-for-gold pawn shop in Queens for a fraction of its worth. It was enough for a one-way ticket. She decided to fly to Boston. She had a distant cousin there. Maybe she could start over. She booked a ticket on the cheapest available flight, a 6 a.m. shuttle. On a different airline, of course. She was banned for life from American. Or so she thought. In her haste and humiliation, she booked on a code-share flight, operated by American Eagle, a subsidiary. Her name, Camilla Hemsley, was so toxic that it was flagged. But the name Camilla R. Hemsley, her middle name was Ruth, paid for with a new debit card, slipped through the automated system. She arrived at LaGuardia before dawn, wearing cheap sunglasses and a scarf over her head, a walking cliché of a woman in disgrace. She was flying coach, middle seat. She was no one, and she was about to face the one person she never wanted to see again. The cabin of the Embraer 175 was cramped. Camilla squeezed into 14B, a middle seat between a large man who was already asleep and a college student texting furiously. The shame was a physical weight, pressing her down. This was her new life. She kept her head down, her scarf tight, praying no one would recognize her. The past week had aged her a decade. The chignon was gone, replaced by limp, unwashed hair. The St. John suit was replaced by nondescript black slacks. The boarding door closed. The lead flight attendant began the safety announcement. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome aboard this American Eagle service to Boston Logan. We are... Camilla's head snapped up. She knew that voice. She looked to the front of the cabin. There, holding the handset, her smile professional, but her eyes scanning the cabin, was Sarah, the flight attendant from Flight 110. Camilla's heart stopped. She felt the blood drain from her face. It was her. Sarah's eyes moved down the aisle, her gaze sweeping over the passengers. She was doing her compliance check. Her eyes hit 14B. They paused, just for a fraction of a second. A flicker of recognition, a slight widening of the eyes. Camilla shrunk, turning her head to the window, but it was too late. Sarah knew. Sarah's professional mask snapped back into place. She said nothing. She didn't point. She didn't whisper. She just continued. Your seatbelts must be fastened low and tight across your lap. But Camilla was no longer listening. She was spiraling. It's the same crew. Oh God, it's the same crew. And as if to confirm her worst, most profound fear, the intercom crackled again. Good morning, folks from the flight deck. This is your first officer, David Epstein. On behalf of our entire crew, I'd like to welcome you aboard. A quick and easy flight up to Boston this morning, about 45 minutes in the air once we get wheels up. Captain will be... There was a pause. Camilla could hear the muffled sound of the cockpit door, a brief, unheard exchange. Then a new voice. A voice she had heard only once before, but which was now burned into her nightmares. A voice of calm, deep, resonant authority. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain, Matthew Cole. Weather in Boston is clear, a little windy. Should be a smooth ride. Cabin crew, please prepare for departure. Camilla Hemsley stopped breathing. She was on his plane. She was trapped, 30,000 feet in the air, in a metal tube controlled by the very man whose life she had tried to ruin, and whose name was now synonymous with her downfall. This wasn't an accident. This was a nightmare. This was divine retribution. She fumbled for the call button. She had to get off. She couldn't do this. Ding. A moment later, Sarah was there, leaning over the sleeping man in the aisle seat. Her face was impassive. Yes, ma'am? Can I help you? I... Camilla whispered, her voice choking. I'm sick. I have to get off the plane. Let me off. Please. Sarah didn't blink. She looked at Camilla, and for the first time, her professional mask slipped, replaced by a look of cold, hard pity. "Ma'am, the cabin door is closed. We are number 2 for takeoff. Please return your seat to the upright position and fasten your seatbelt." "No, you don't understand. I can't be on this flight. "You have 2 choices, Mrs. Hemsley," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than any shout. "You can sit quietly for the 45-minute flight to Boston, or I can have the captain return to the gate, at which point you will be arrested for interfering with a flight crew. Again. And this time it will be federal. What's it going to be?" Camilla stared at her. There was no escape. The plane turned onto the active runway. The engines roared. Camilla Hemsley, a woman who had once demanded this very pilot be fired for his existence, was now gripping her armrests in pure, primal terror, utterly and completely at his mercy. The karma was no longer just social or financial. It was existential. The 48-minute flight to Boston was a masterclass in psychological torment. Camilla Hemsley sat paralyzed in 14B, a middle-seat prisoner. She was no longer a person. She was a nerve ending, hypersensitive to every sound, every subtle shift of the aircraft. The roar of the engines during takeoff felt like a personal accusation, a sound of pure, inescapable power. As the plane climbed, her knuckles, gripping the cheap vinyl armrests, were bloodless. She was trapped, 30,000 feet in the air, in a metal tube, controlled by the very man whose life she had tried to ruin, and whose name was now synonymous with her downfall. Every minor bump of turbulence, the kind she would have never even noticed while sipping champagne in 3A, felt like a personal judgment. A sudden, sharp drop of a few feet made her gasp, a tiny, choked sound. Was he doing this on purpose? Was this his petty, terrifying revenge to scare her? The thought flared, hot and paranoid, and then was immediately doused by a colder, more humiliating realization. He almost certainly wasn't thinking of her at all. He was simply flying the plane. This, her personal hell, was just his Tuesday morning commute. She watched Sarah, the flight attendant, move through the cabin. Sarah was a vision of detached professionalism. She served coffee to the man in 13C, smiled at a woman in 15A. Her movements were economical, calm. She never once made eye contact with 14B. To Sarah, Camilla was not a monster or a villain. She was, quite simply, cargo. She was a liability to be managed, a problem to be contained, no different than an unsecured galley latch. The neutrality was somehow more agonizing than open contempt. The flight was a lifetime. She was forced to confront the impossible, existential truth. The man she had dehumanized, the man she had deemed unfit to even be in her presence, was the only thing keeping her from plummeting to the earth. She was, in the most primal and absolute sense, at his mercy. Her life was entirely in his hands, and he, by all accounts, was a man she had given every reason to hate her. The intercom chimed, the sound slicing through her anxiety. "Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for arrival." It was Captain Cole's voice, smooth, professional, utterly calm. It was the same voice she'd heard just before her world ended at JFK. Now, it was the sound of her approaching judgment. The plane began its descent. Camilla stared out the window, past the sleeping man next to her, watching the clouds give way to the blue-gray sprawl of the Boston suburbs. She braced herself for the landing, her body tensing, anticipating a jolt, a jarring slam onto the tarmac, some small, physical evidence of his anger. The landing was, of course, perfect. It was a greaser in pilot terms. The The wheels touched the runway at Logan Airport with a contact so gentle it was barely perceptible. It was a whisper of a landing, the kind of landing that 15,000 hours of flawless flying produces. It was the landing of a consummate professional, a man who didn't let the world, or the monsters in his cabin, interfere with his job. That perfection was the ultimate, unspoken rebuke. It was a demonstration of the very expertise she had scorned. The plane taxied to the gate. The engines spooled down, their roar fading to a whine. The final ding of the seatbelt sign turning off felt like a pardon for everyone else. For Camilla, it was a summons. She did not move. She let the other passengers deplane, the sleeping man in 14C, who grunted as he gathered his things, the college student in 14A, who was already texting. She watched them all file past, envying their ignorance, their normal lives, their simple destinations. She waited, her heart a cold stone in her chest, trying to figure out what to do. Should she run? Should she hide in the lavatory? Should she beg? Finally, the cabin was empty. The silence was heavy, broken only by the high-pitched whine of the auxiliary power unit and the distant sound of the new flight crew chatting in the jet bridge. Camilla stood, her legs shaking so badly she had to grip the seat back. She pulled her cheap rollerboard, the one she'd bought at a drugstore in Queens, into the aisle. She began the long walk of shame, past row 10, past row 5, to the front galley. As she reached the bulkhead, she saw the cockpit door was open, and they were waiting for her. Captain Matthew Cole, First Officer David Epstein, and Sarah. They weren't blocking her path, but they were standing there, a united, uniformed front. Sarah was by the galley, her arms crossed. Epstein stood just outside the cockpit door, his face a mask of undisguised contempt. And in the center, his hat on, his posture immaculate, was Captain Cole. His face was unreadable. It wasn't angry. It wasn't smug. It was just calm. Camilla stopped. The manufactured air in the cabin felt too thin to breathe. She looked at the three of them, the arbiters of her final humiliation. She had to say something. The words felt like swallowing glass. She stammered. Her voice was a pathetic croak. I'm so sorry. It was a wretched, pathetic, self-serving sound. Captain Cole held up a hand, not to stop her, but to ask for silence. Mrs. Hemsley, he said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the small space, cutting through the whine of the engines. We didn't arrange this. This wasn't a trap. He took a half step forward. The skies are just smaller than you think. This was just a coincidence on the rotation. He looked at her, truly looked at her, taking in the cheap clothes, the ruined hair, the terror in her eyes. He didn't seem to see the viral video monster. He just saw the wreck she had become. What you did at JFK last week, he continued, his voice still level, that wasn't about me. It wasn't about the Wilson family. It was about you. The consequences. Your husband. Your daughter. Your money. I read about it. That's all on you, too. I take no pleasure in it. The last spark of her old self, the entitled, cornered animal, flared up. She needed to be a victim. She couldn't be the sole architect of this. You ruined my life, she whispered, the words wet with tears of self-pity. Before Captain Cole could even react, Sarah stepped forward, her face hard as granite. No, Mum, Sarah snapped, her voice low and sharp. You did. You stood on his plane, in my galley, and created an unsafe environment because you didn't like the color of our skin. You demanded he be fired. For existing? She pointed at Captain Cole. Today you were just a passenger, and we did our job. He did his job. We brought you to Boston safely. We kept you alive. That is the difference between you and us. We are professionals. That one word, professionals, was the final blow. It was the bright, shining line that separated them from her. They had their skill, their integrity, their dignity. She had nothing. Camilla finally broke. It wasn't a delicate socialite's tear. It was a full, ugly, guttural collapse. A dam of arrogance, denial, and self-delusion that had been cracking for a week finally shattered. A sob tore out of her, a sound from the very bottom of her new, hollow life. She leaned against the bulkhead, her face in her hands, the cheap fabric of her sleeve soaking up the tears. "I lost everything," she wept, the words muffled. I have nothing. I have nowhere to go." The 3 crew members just watched her. They didn't move. They didn't offer a tissue or a word of comfort. They simply let her admission hang in the stale, recycled air. Captain Cole looked at her for a long, hard moment. When he spoke, his voice had softened, not with pity, but with a profound, clinical finality. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "You did." He let the brutal confirmation land. "But you're on solid ground now. The flight is over. What you do next, that's also on you." He paused, then delivered the final, quiet judgment. "Choose better." He nodded to his crew. "David, Sarah, let's go. We have a turnaround to DCA." As if a switch had been thrown, the 3 of them became a crew again. They picked up their flight bags, they zipped their jackets, they didn't look back at her. With practiced, professional ease, they walked out of the plane, down the jet bridge, their footsteps echoing, their quiet conversation about wind shear, and their next leg already starting up. Camilla Hemsley was left utterly alone in the cabin. The only sound was the high-pitched whine of the auxiliary power unit, and her own wretched, broken sobs. The hard karma hadn't been a lightning strike from God. It had been quiet, efficient, and professional, and it had just walked off the job, leaving her to finally face the wreckage of the woman she had become. The first thing you notice about the rental car center at Boston Logan International Airport is the smell. It's an acrid, chemical lemon scent, perpetually pumped through the vents to mask the underlying odors of rental return exhaust, stale coffee, and the weary sweat of travelers. The soundtrack is a constant, dull roar, the thud of suitcases on linoleum, the disembodied voice from the shuttle bus loudspeaker, and the incessant, droning click-clack of keyboards. For Camilla Hemsley, this was the entire sensory landscape of her life. 12 months had passed since the incident at JFK. The woman who had once checked her Cartier watch impatiently was now a woman who watched a plastic clock on the wall, counting the minutes until her 15-minute break. She stood behind the counter of Advantage Rentals, a third-tier agency known for its high-mileage compacts and confusing insurance policies. Her name tag, pinned crookedly to the polyester vest that was a perpetual, itchy size too large, read simply, Camilla. The silver-blonde chignon was long gone, replaced by dishwater grey hair, limp with the humidity, pulled back into a simple, severe bun. Her eyes were tired, underlined with the bruised purple of chronic exhaustion. "And will you be needing the additional collision insurance, Mr. Peterson?" she asked, her voice a flat, practiced monotone. I don't know. My personal insurance should cover it, right?" the man said, a salesman from Ohio who was already annoyed by his flight. "Sir, your personal policy likely has a high deductible," Camilla recited from the script she'd been forced to memorize. "Our peace of mind waiver covers you completely. No deductible, no questions." Yeah, fine, whatever. Better add it." He didn't look up from his phone. "Okay," she said, her fingers moving over the sticky keyboard. That will be an additional $29.99 per day. Please sign here on the screen. This was her life, a series of small, grinding humiliations. She, who had once managed a staff of 3 at her Park Avenue co-op, was now upselling insurance to men in wrinkled shirts. She, who had once commanded charity boards, now worried about her customer service score and the threat of being written up by her 24-year-old shift manager, Kyle. Her life outside the airport was no better. The divorce had been swift and total. Richard, citing the public cruel and inhuman treatment of his good name, had successfully argued that her actions constituted a breach of their financial partnership. A team of ruthless lawyers had systematically dismantled her life, leaving her with a pittance that was gone in 6 months. She now lived in a tiny, 1-bedroom apartment in Revere at the end of the Blue Line. The walls were so thin she could hear her neighbors' arguments, and the theme song to the game show they watched every night. Her commute was a 45-minute train ride, standing room only, surrounded by the very public she had once so desperately avoided. Her daughter, Amanda, was gone. 6 months after the cancelled nuptials, Camilla had found the public Instagram profile. Amanda and Julian had eloped at a registry office in London. There was one photo. Amanda was in a simple cream dress, her fiancé in a blue suit. They were both smiling. But the real star of the photo was her new mother-in-law, Lady Annalise Creston Doyle, who stood between them, her dark, elegant face beaming with a grace Camilla had never possessed. Camilla had looked at that photo for an hour, the phone in her hand shaking, realizing she was not just uninvited, she was unmourned. Camilla was no longer a person. She was a ghost, haunting the periphery of other people's lives. A burst of laughter, genuine and bright, cut through the terminal's dull roar. It was so out of place in her world that Camilla flinched and looked up. A group in immaculate American Airlines uniforms was walking past, heading from the arrivals level toward the employee shuttle bay. They were pilots and flight attendants, their rollerboard bags gliding silently behind them. They were moving with a purpose and an easy camaraderie that made Camilla's stomach clench with a feeling so old it was almost foreign. Envy. Leading them was a tall man, his uniform crisp, the 4 stripes of a captain prominent on his shoulders. He was laughing at something a flight attendant had said. His posture was perfect. He exuded an aura of calm, earned authority. It was Captain Matthew Cole. Camilla's breath hitched. The cleaning rag she was using to wipe down her counter fell from her numb hand. He looked different. He looked younger, lighter. She had heard through the airport gossip mill, a surprisingly efficient network, that he was no longer just a line pilot. He had been promoted. He was a chief pilot for the Northeast, in charge of training and standards. The man whose career she had tried to end was now molding the next generation of pilots. He was a legend in the company, a quiet hero whose stand at JFK had become a mandatory part of the crew's conflict resolution training. He was everything she had been, but real, respected, admired, in charge. He was walking toward his future. She was stuck, permanently, in the terminal of her own failure. His gaze swept the concourse, a pilot's habit of scanning his environment. His eyes passed right over the Advantage Rentals counter, right over her. He didn't see her. Why would he? She was no longer Nosh Airport Camilla, the viral villain. She wasn't even Camilla Hemsley, the socialite. She was a woman in a cheap polyester vest, part of the beige, forgettable background. The absolute, crushing totality of her irrelevance hit her. It was worse than the poverty. It was worse than the shame. It was nothing. As Captain Cole and his crew disappeared around the corner, their laughter fading, Camilla remained frozen. The world tilted slightly. A throat cleared in front of her. "Excuse me?" "Miss?" Camilla snapped back. A customer had stepped up to her counter. It was a black family. A father, a mother, and 2 young children, a boy and a girl, bouncing on their heels, bubbling with an infectious excitement for their trip. They were a perfect, happy mirror of the Wilson family. Camilla flinched. It was an involuntary, ugly spasm. A ghost of her old self, the venomous, entitled woman, rearing its head from the deep, dark place it still lived. The prejudice wasn't gone. It hadn't been learned away. It was just dormant. The father, noticing her strange expression, frowned. Are you open?" The terror that shot through Camilla was cold and electric. It wasn't moral terror. It was practical. It was the fear of her shift manager, Kyle. The fear of an argument. The fear of a complaint. The fear of losing this, her last, most pathetic foothold on the world. She couldn't afford another incident. She couldn't afford, quite literally, to be that person ever again. Her compliance was not a virtue. It was her prison. She took a short, sharp breath. She bent down, picked up the fallen rag, and forced her face into the brittle, practiced mask of customer service. She smoothed the front of her itchy vest. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice a hollow monotone. "Welcome to Advantage Rentals. How can I help you today?" That's the story of Camilla Hemsley, a woman who had everything and lost it all, not because of a bad investment or a terrible accident, but because of the ugliness in her own heart. In a single moment, her complaint about too many black people set off a chain reaction of karma that was as swift as it was brutal. She didn't just lose her flight, she lost her family, her fortune, and her entire identity. She was left with nothing but a job serving the very people she once looked down on, a permanent resident in the airport that was the scene of her crime. What do you think? Was this karma fitting, or was it too harsh? What would you have done if you were Captain Cole? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. This story is a powerful reminder that our words have consequences, and that in a world so connected, you never, ever know who is listening. Thank you for watching. If you were moved by this story, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe for more real-life drama and hard karma stories every single week.